Hey everybody, welcome to the somewhat delayed second episode of my wrestling show, Wrestling on Wrestling. I'm here, as always, with Doc Gregory,
How
veteran of the
good?
indie wrestling scene, the Tommy Young of indie wrestling, the greatest referee in the world. Um, we were off last week, which kind of sucked because it would have been our second show. But I think my technical issues are resolved. At least I hope so. And we're going to talk wrestling for about an hour here with you. Um, First, I guess, Doc, let's talk about a few of the big things that have happened in WWE since the last time we did one of these. Raw last week ended with Daniel Bryan turning babyface after he had just kind of sort of turned heel like a week before, 2 weeks before, which was a really big moment. The crowd reaction was really awesome to that. The way he led the yes chant, and then they also announced the Ultimate Warrior is going into the Hall of Fame this year.
Yes.
And there's also going to be this thing called the WWE Network. We missed so much last week. So let's start, I guess. You want to just start with, I guess the biggest story is the WWE Network. Let's talk about that first. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm absolutely excited that the WWE finally, after a year or so of talking about it and not getting off the ground, they're finally going for it, and they're going to be opening up their own network. It has definitely got under the dander of some of the some of the dish networks. Like, well, I just said it, Dish Network.
Yeah.
Didn't like it too much. But I think it's a good move. I mean, honestly, for $60, which is your initial subscription, you had to sign up for a 6 month subscription. That's how you get in. And the very first pay-per-view they're going to be streaming live is WrestleMania. Now you factor in how much WrestleMania costs if you order it through pay-per-view, and you've already paid for at least that 6 months. Now you factor in the $30 a month you pay for every single pay-per-view every single year. You'd say 12 pay-per-views, $30. That's a lot of money. So $120 a year, that's not a very bad deal right there for the pay-per-views alone. Now, when it comes to the products that's going to be available on the WWE Network, um, they're not really going to be concentrating much on the old AWA stuff and the old stuff that I absolutely appreciate. This is where I'm on the fence about the whole network. Um, they're going to be more concentrating on the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s of the literally the WWF, the ECW, and the WCW area. That's basically what they're going to be
Yeah.
constant. They're not going to leave things up, forever either. So they're going to be constantly adding things and removing things. It's almost going to be like the way Netflix works. But is it worth the penny you pay for it? As of right now, I absolutely think it is absolutely worth every single dime because you sign up, you can get it on your computer, your Xbox, your PlayStation, your iPhone, your iPad, your Kindle Fire. So you can basically watch wrestling all damn day, wherever you go. That's what I'm
That's it.
planning on doing. I'm going to get a little monitor and put it in my truck while I'm working, and that way I'm just going to stream WWE
Oh,
wrestling all day long while I'm working.
yeah. I I told I told Ashley, my wife, like the day after they made the announcement, we woke up and I said, just to warn you, you've got like 6 weeks.
No,
Because I'm totally getting it, and it's going to be available as a Roku channel, which is awesome because that's where I watch most of my TV. I have a little hockey puck Roku thing that you can stream video through, and that's how I watch Netflix and Hulu and all this stuff, and that's how I'm going to watch it. And I mean, it'll be a challenge to watch anything else for a while, because it sounds like you say, I mean, it is gonna. It sounds like the video library part of it is going to be a lot like Netflix, where you're not guaranteed that all the content is always going to be there. They're going to be adding things and taking things away and kind of rolling things over. But really, that's just the icing on the cake. Like you said, the real reason to get it, if you're a wrestling fan, is you basically get every pay per view for $10 a month, and that by itself, again, if you give a shit about wrestling, makes it worth it right there. All the extra stuff, the new programming and getting access to the streaming content, the tape library, all the old pay-per-views, which sounds like it's going to be great. That's just extra. I mean, even if they didn't have that robust of a thing, oh shit, every pay-per-view for $10 a month. and if you order them piecemeal now from pay-per-view providers, you pay, if you get the HD version, you pay $70. I mean, how do you not take that deal? You know?
I mean, it's absolutely insane.
But
when wrestling was a hotbed during the Monday Night Wars, you're looking at a guy who had Antietam cable up in our area, so you ordered the pay-per-views.
Yeah.
And of course, you have WCW running a pay-per-view every month, $25-$30. Then you had WWE running one every single month, $25-$30. My cable bill was insane, and even if I was to do that today, with the inflation of pay-per-views the way they are, oh, you would be insane. To me, it's like I haven't ordered a pay-per-view in so long because I just don't know. I don't want to burden with that bill. And simply because you can find out a lot of things while you're watching. If you're online and you go to certain websites, you might not be able to watch it, but you get the results as they come in, and print out reports. And I've been in the business so long that I can read a report, and it's like reading a book. I can put that picture in my mind and see how a match went down. So pay-per-views became unimportant to me, but now I look at this as an avenue where I can finally return to watching these, especially now that we're doing this show. I'm going to have to watch the pay-per-views.
Yeah.
I actually sat and watched all 3 hours of Raw. I said, I haven't done this in forever.
Yeah, I'm going to have to start watching the full 3-hour Raw too, because the last few months I've been watching the Hulu Plus version, which is edited down to 90 minutes. And is a great way to watch that show, but I figure I'm not going to have an excuse, especially since we're going to be doing this show every week and talking about it. They're going to do part of the network is going to be replays of the previous night's Raw, and I imagine that will be the full 3-hour version, not just an edited version. So I guess I'll be back to watching all 3 hours of Raw every week. But it's not that bad. I mean, I'd say it like that, but it's. I mean, I'm a wrestling fan. What am I really going to complain about watching it? But yeah, the thing that it made me think about when I first heard, because before they announced the network, before they announced all the details, I guess a lot of people sort of assumed that that's what the big announcement was going to be, but they weren't sure what the details of the network would be. And when they announced it, and it was like WWE's version of Netflix, plus like new original content and replays of the current shows, plus every pay-per-view, I thought, wow, their pay-per-view business must be way worse than than I thought it was. If they think they can come out ahead doing it this way, if they think they can make more money getting more people, giving them a $10 a month subscription with a 6-month commitment versus charging $50 per pay-per-view. I mean, if you read the news reports every month when they release the buy rates of the previous month's pay-per-view, you've noticed, especially the last year or so, the buy rates even for the big shows have really been in the toilet. Mm-hmm. And I think UFC is getting crazy buy rates for their pay-per-views. Like UFC is getting like close to 1 million buys for some of their shows, and WWE hasn't come anywhere close to that for years. So it must be that they're at that point,
There's far more people in this world that love to see one another beat the living shit out of another human being in this world. And even when it's more legit, like the UFC, I'm not saying that, wrestlers don't take their beatings and poundings, but UFC fighters, when someone gets hit, they get fucking popped in the mouth. You can tell the difference, That was when I was in wrestling. I was when I threw a punch, I was one of the big, that guy, slapping the shoulder, making that sound, making that pop when you hit somebody. And then I started watching UFC and started seeing more legitimate hits, and thought, I need to stop doing that, because that just doesn't seem right. I need to make it look, when and immediately I almost stopped that and went back to the quick punch stomp, when you punch and stomp instead. And I think that works so much better in wrestling. And I credit that to the UFC. It made me stop doing that stuff to make my punches, sound like they're really popping off someone's face, when if you ever punch someone in the face, that's not what it sounds like.
Right. Well, and UFC, or I guess I should say MMA, just in general. I mean, that's why we have a tap out in pro wrestling now. I mean, it's easy to forget. Like even back in the '90s, before Ken Shamrock started getting guys to tap out on Raw to the ankle lock, and people got used to that. I mean, a submission was like there was no visual cue for a submission in a match. Nowadays, it works so much better when a guy's in a submission hold, and when he submits, he has that tap out, so the fans immediately know that that's it. It's this great visual cue. Whereas back in the day, if Ric Flair got somebody in a figure four, and it was one of the rare times that he actually won the match with it, the guy actually had to, turn to the referee and go, yes, 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 I quit, and and it wasn't quite as visual. Whereas now you've got that tap out where you got the image of the guy like fighting it and going, oh, I don't know, and then finally he just has to tap it out. So that's something that MMA has sort of forced wrestling to incorporate into the show, that I think is a real positive part of it. But let's talk about the Daniel Bryan thing too, because we could talk about WWE Network the whole time, because I'm really excited about it, and I'm sure once it launches, we'll be talking about it. Like what were you up until 3 o'clock in the morning watching on the WWE Network? But the Daniel Bryan thing, there was this. I don't pay any attention to sports like other than baseball and pro wrestling, which isn't really a sport. So I wasn't really following that closely. But apparently there was like a college basketball game or something a few weeks ago where the crowd was chanting yes, and this was right after they had Bryan join the Wyatt family. And rumor has it on the internet, and who knows how reliable that is, but rumor has it that Vince saw that crowd chanting yes right after he had turned Bryan heel to join the Wyatt family, and either Vince decided for himself or Triple H got in Vince's ear and said, look, we need to turn this guy back. Like, there are people who aren't even at wrestling shows doing his chant. It's, he has to be a babyface. And that's what finally convinced them to sort of give up on the Bryan as a heel thing and say, okay, we're just going to turn him back. People can cheer for him and just go from there. And it's another example of their undisciplined storytelling. But in this case, I think it worked for the best, because I think it was inevitable that the guy was going to be a good guy anyway.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I said that when I first when the gimmick first took hold, and I'm listening to the crowd still chant for Bryan, and I wasn't really sure what they were trying to get with that, because the crowd is still solidly behind him, but not behind the Wyatt family. It's completely split. It's not all or nothing, and he's supposed to be in this super group with them. And I pondered to myself when he finally turned back and against Bray Wyatt, that I said they did it for one of two reasons. It's either that they like the Wyatt family where they are, and they don't want them to become good guys, which if Daniel Bryan stays with them, then they're going to get more recognition and go higher up on the totem pole. Or Daniel Bryan, they just can't get that crowd, because it was very loud and clear in the crowd what they thought about Daniel Bryan being in the Wyatt family. They could not get the crowd to sway against him, so it was really a moot point. But I think the way they've taken it at this point, it was a really quick short storyline, and Daniel Bryan explained it the best he could, I guess.
Yeah.
I would have just said, hey guys, you know what? We tried something, but we couldn't let that happen because you guys want to see me right where I am. But the crowd response is so insane for this man. It's like the merchandise is crazy already. The crowd is 100% behind him. I did not see very few people not throwing their fingers up in the air. And it's become a household thing to do, because you see more and more people outside of wrestling just doing that, and you know exactly where they got it from.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing I noticed, especially watching last night's show, and last week as well, when he turned and he was leading the yes chant at the end of the show, right before he did that awesome spot that I loved, where it was right before he hit his finish on Bray when he hit him with that knee strike, but he was standing in the corner and he was like directing the yes chant. Like they started chanting it at the normal pace, and he actually was able to slow them down just by moving his arms, and they were doing it exactly in time with his arm movements. It was so thrilling to see a guy have the crowd in the palm of his hand like that. And the thing is it's like that's the only that when the yes chant stuff first started, and when the whole Daniel Bryan thing started after like WrestleMania the year before last, when he lost to Sheamus, and then that crowd the night after at Raw was just chanting for him all night. You when it started, you could have said like, well, it's just certain crowds in certain towns, or it's like the post-Mania crowd, and there's a lot of internet fans in the crowd, or when people start the yes chant, it's just a few people, or it's just a few sections of the crowd. But man, last week and last night, it was everybody. Like you said, it did, from here, from watching it on TV, there didn't look like there was a single person who wasn't into that yes chant. It was the entire arena. And they would just be nuts not to run with this guy at this point. I'm not saying they have to put the world title on him like next week. I mean, clearly, I just hope they have something big planned for him at WrestleMania, whether it's a title match, or whether it's him versus Triple H, or him getting the Undertaker match, or something. They have to do something huge with him at Mania, because he is, I mean, nobody else on the roster has the crowd in the palm of their hand like that. I mean, CM Punk is still awesome and can still go out and cut a great promo and get people into his match. People still really care about what he does. But, man, Bryan right now, I mean, they just eat up everything he does, and they want to cheer for him no matter what he does. I mean, he's like the closest they have right now to like a Steve Austin type of guy. Who is still sort of on his way up, like Austin, like in 96 or 97, where he's still on his way up. He's not quite at the very top yet, but the people are just pushing him up there, and you just know if all goes that way, eventually he's gonna be the guy, at least for a little while.
Yeah, I think Daniel, after all this time, has finally escaped the stigma of being that internet wrestler, the guy who was made on the internet. Which is almost a mute point, because it's like saying this guy was made on the internet, and that's why we should sign him. Why? Well, because those people that love his stuff on the internet they're going to come to your show, and the way to, just like any business, the way to build a business or a franchise is by word of mouth. And those internet fans are coming to your show, and it's like, oh, who's this guy? Well, that's Daniel Bryan. You've never seen him? You should check him out on YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely.
and bam, that's how it happened, because he is that amazing. He is an incredible worker. He's a workhorse of this business, and I don't care how small he is, because the man's smaller than I am.
Yeah.
Which is the reason I thought I'll never make it into WWE. I'm too small. But this is back in the '90s, so it was pretty true. Rey Mysterio was the only one to escape that, and he was made in WCW.
Right. Well, the thing about the size thing. There was a spot in last night's show where it was when Bryan came down the second time and interfered in the match with the Wyatts and the Usos, and he hit Eric Rowan, big Eric Rowan. He hit him with a kick, and Rowan just fell like a fucking tree. Like, here's a guy who's like twice as big as Bryan. Bryan kicks him once, and he's just, he's dead. I thought, all right, Like that's how you should present this guy, as he's lethal, he's dangerous, Like, one of the things that really irritates me, just one of those little like nagging things that just gets to me, when JBL says, and he said it about Rey Mysterio last night, but he says, oh, Daniel Bryan is fun to watch. I hate that. And I love JBL as a commentator. I think he's a great commentator. But when Daniel Bryan is like in a match, and it's usually during his comeback, during like the most intense, exciting part of the match, when he's hitting those drop kicks in the corner, or he's flying off the ropes and hitting that like Hart Foundation clothesline that he does, and JBL will go, "Oh man, this guy's fun to watch." Like, no. He's in there kicking somebody's ass. He's not fun to watch. He's beating somebody up. He's kicking a guy in the face. He's not fun to watch. Like, if the Big Show chokeslammed a guy through a table, would you say this guy's fun to watch? If you're watching
JBL himself, brutal as hell when he got in the ring, but when it came to promos and getting over with the fans, JBL was fun to watch.
Yeah. Absolutely. JBL won me over, when he first started doing the JBL thing. And then they put the world title on him, like,
I love
like
that.
a month. I mean, I loved it eventually. When they first did it, I was like, what the hell? It's Bradshaw. Like, why is Bradshaw the WWE champion? Like, I didn't get it at first. But then they kept the belt on him for like almost a year or something, and and by the end of it, I was really into it. I thought, wow, okay, that was the right move. He really is good at this in this role. But at the beginning, I was like, oh, come on, he was in the APA like a month ago. Now he's the #1 guy.
Well,
But he won me over.
The thing about JBL is if you did, and I'm sure you know it by now because it's all been publicized, but you know, you knew outside of the wrestling business that he was very intelligent and well schooled, and he was
Hmm.
making very smart investments and pretty much building a fortune, you know, to lay back on when his wrestling days are done. So it's like when he came out. And I was semi-aware of this when they finally switched him over and came out with what I called the J.R. Ewing gimmick.
Totally.
And I was sold on it because you know I thought the APA thing, as fun as it was, it's played its course, and it was more of a just like Ron Simmons we talked about last show. It's more of a backstage gimmick more than you know an in ring talent, which that doesn't really get it over with me. If you got a spot on the show, I want to see you wrestle.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way. I'm the same way. I want to talk about the Hall of Fame real quick, and then we'll get into talking about. You had a great suggestion, Doc, to do a regular segment where we talk about a different wrestling legend every week,
Mm-hmm.
and you suggested exotic Adrian Street, which is he's one of my favorite older guys too. And I know I've heard you talk about him. I think you've talked about him with me before when we've had conversations. I know you really like his work. But before we get to exotic Adrian, Ultimate Warrior's going into the Hall of Fame. I want to know how you feel about that. And also, I think they didn't announce a new guy last night, did they? It's still just
No,
Warrior.
no.
Or did
Honestly,
they
I
announce a
didn't.
second guy?
I didn't see one last night. I might have skipped over it because
Yeah,
I just fast forward to the wrestling, and usually I will skip through the promos and everything because they're just promoting their own stuff, which you see a million times before. So I may
right.
have skipped through something, but I don't think I saw an announcement last night.
No, I don't think there was one. So it's I know that's fine because WrestleMania is like still 2 months away. But so Warrior's going in, and your thoughts on Ultimate Warrior going into the Hall of Fame, and also if you could, like, who else do you think they might be putting in this year?
When the magic unicorns come out of the sky and all the little warriors have screamed and united, it is time for the Ultimate Warrior to finally take his place amongst all the Hall of Famers. No, honestly, it's about time that they settled their differences. And you know, there was a lot. I've seen a lot of the Ultimate Warriors videos on YouTube, and he's been pretty candid about his opinions. And recently a letter between I just read this online a letter. When Ultimate Warrior was first leaving the WWE or was renegotiating his contract before he left with Vince, and there's a back and forth, and the Ultimate Warrior is just like all over the place. Vince is being a very good businessman, like he's always. It is crazy. It's actually posted on WrestlingInc.com if you haven't seen this letter yet, so you should check it out. It's also available in PDF if you want to download it.
Wow.
But no, I think all things come to pass, and you knew it was coming when they did the Legends deal with him. He was promoted in the WWE 2K14 video game, and he did the commercial. You knew that wounds have been healed. They did it last year with Bruno, and you knew it was coming. And so yeah, it's about time. We talked about him last time. I think Jake the Snake Roberts deserves a place in the Hall of Fame now that he's healthy again, and because he's a great talker, I think his speech would be phenomenal. Also in the Hall of Fame, I'm not really sure. Maybe no tag team of some sort.
I was thinking that. I was thinking about because I knew I wanted to.
Demolition.
Oh, Demolition would be sweet. I didn't even
Yeah.
think about Demolition because I was thinking because they've gotten a lot more liberal about inducting guys in who never really did much in the WWF.
Hmm.
And I thought, man, Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express, like all these old classic NWA tag teams. I mean, they're eventually going to have to put them in anyway because they put in 4 or 5 guys every year. They're going to get down to the bottom of the barrel at some point. They're going to have to, but I would love to see, like the Rock and Roll Express get in there, or my fantasy other than Jake getting in. Jake is really the only one I really care about. Well, Macho Man would be great to see
Macho
too,
Man.
but
I've been saying that one for like 3, 4 years now. It's like, where's the Macho Man?
Yeah,
You know, you put
it's
Hogan in, you got to put the Macho Man in. Come on.
yeah. Well, and it's like it's one of those wrestling fan things where like it may just be idle speculation and it's just it means nothing, but it does start to look a little weird when like everybody else from that era is in, and Macho, who was one of the biggest stars, if not the second biggest star next to Hogan of that era, and he's not in there. It's like, well, that's a little weird, you know?
I'm telling you, it's a rage and it's a conspiracy against macho madness. Yeah.
Yeah. They need to get Jay Lethal to come in and do the acceptance speech as Macho Man.
Yeah, his imitations in TNA with Macho Man, even Ric Flair, I think they were pretty spot on.
They're
But
pretty good.
Macho Man, he nailed that. So I mean,
Yeah.
if it was me, it's like you no longer would see Jay Lethal. I'd be just doing that Macho Man gimmick forever
Yeah.
because I think it sold. It was great.
Oh, and it got him over. I mean,
Yeah.
people had a reason to give a shit about Jay Lethal. Not that, and Jay Lethal was great, but he was one of those guys who was just sort of another guy. And now all of a sudden, oh, he's the guy who does the Macho Man gimmick. Yeah, I would love Demolition is. It's surprising Demolition's not in either. I know Bill Eadie had some tension with the company back in the day. I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not, but
Bill, it was the first WWE superstar I had ever worked with in the wrestling business. He had come to a show we did over in Martinsburg at the old Cadillac Club, and I was managing at the time and trying to face off against Shane Shadows and get him out of CPW. And I also put up, and I have the video somewhere, I should put that on Facebook. I also had a guy called the Cremator. He was dressed up like Michael Myers, and he was going to face off against Demolition Axe. And, of course, as a manager, as you always do, because I was, sticking my nose where it didn't belong, and Bill grabbed a hold of me, and, he did the looking around the crowd for the crowd approval, and the crowd definitely said, yeah, kick that little scrawny bitch's ass. And so Bill did. So it was my first experience with someone who had actually been to the big show. It was pretty exciting for me. So I always credit Demolition Axe for that experience.
yeah, I can imagine. Demolition regaining the tag titles at WrestleMania 6 was always one of my favorite moments. Like as a child, as a wrestling fan, I loved because they got him back from Andre the Giant and Haku.
Mm-hmm.
And they were baby faces, so you get Demolition, the babyface tag team, getting their titles back, which was awesome. And then right after that, Andre turned on Bobby Heenan,
Right.
and Andre turned back babyface too. So the whole thing was just a really nice, sort of satisfying segment. As I guess I was 9 when that happened. But yeah, anyway, my dream Hall of Fame induction, other than Jake, would be to see the Midnight Express go in with Jim Cornette, because that would be the greatest like Hall of Fame acceptance speech. I would just love to see them give Cornette a live mic and just say, okay, you've got 10 minutes, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the same thing. Jim Cornette, it's like, does he deserve that accolade? Yes, he does. For
Totally.
everything he's done in this business, he's been all over the place. He's been every single major promotion. He deserves to be in your Hall of Fame. The fact is, he had that man alive mic, and he has a podcast, and he has a YouTube channel, and I listen to some of that stuff, and he shoots from the hip, and that's what I love about Jim Cornette. He ain't gonna snow job you guys.
No,
So,
and because he just doesn't give a shit. That's what I love about Jim Cornette. Is even when he was still like working for, I don't think he does the Ring of Honor thing anymore, does he?
I don't follow Ring of Honor too much because I think I watch. I think pretty much everybody's come to the other big leagues now that I used to watch Ring of Honor.
Yeah, I know he was like the executive producer of Ring of Honor for a couple of years, and from the sound of his podcast, it sounds like he doesn't. I don't know if he's said it explicitly or not, but it doesn't sound like he's doing that anymore. Or at least he's not in as active of a role with the company as he was. But even back then, when he was working for a wrestling company, he just didn't give a shit. He would give shoot interviews, or he would tell stories on, every possible wrestler you could think of that he had ever interacted with, and would just, air out all the dirty laundry he could think of. and you know, he pops up occasionally on WWE DVDs, uh, but he hasn't actually worked with them for years, and I don't know if they would, you know, if he wouldn't be considered for that reason if he pissed somebody off or what. But man, you know, if we're going to pretend that the Hall of Fame is a real thing and that people get in there because they deserve it, I mean, if you're putting managers in, Jim Cornette's got to be one of the guys you put in. Speaking of which, I heard somewhere that they might put Paul Bearer in this year, which would be nice. Not just because he's dead, but because he was an awesome manager.
Yeah, I mean, he's been around for a long time. He did the wrestling thing. He did Percy Pringle as a manager before he
Mhm.
became Paul Bearer. And he's been a staple in the wrestling community for a long, long time. So, yeah, I would honor him in the Hall of Fame. I wouldn't have any problems with him going in.
Yeah, it'd be nice. Um, okay, so let's talk a little bit about Adrian Street. We're going to talk about a different wrestling legend every week. And Doc, your suggestion, this was your idea for a thing to talk about on the show, which I think was great. And your first suggested legend was Exotic Adrian Street, a great heel from the '80s. I guess is where he did his most known work. Talk a little bit about Adrian Street and why you think he's such a legend.
Well, I mean, when I first got into wrestling, I grew up in the '80s, so I was more of the Hulk Hogan rock and wrestling era. But when I became more appreciative for the old school wrestling, it probably became my high school term paper I wrote on the history of professional wrestling, and I had to go out and get some source books and everything, and I looked up stuff, and that's where I learned things about Frank Gotch, which we consider like our first North American champion. And then I saw those pictures of this very flamboyant guy, because of course they cover when wrestling became more of a entertainment business with Gorgeous George. And then, of course, I saw pictures. Gorgeous George, of course, kind of goes along the balance of Exotic Adrian Street, which is where I saw pictures of him in this book. And I was really interested in him and took a liking to him. And then, I used to get these VHS tapes, and I came across a movie called Grunt the Wrestling Movie, about a wrestler called Mad Dog Joe DiCurso. He apparently accidentally decapitates a man in the ring and goes missing for years. And it's a wrestling movie, but Adrian Street's in that, and I got to see some of his musical talent in that as well. I just took a really big liking to him at that point. Plus, he is a wrestler that played, like, without actually ever saying that he was gay, played an openly flamboyant, almost gayish type character that got her. Which back in those days, you go through the Southern territories, that is going to be like something. It's like a wildfire down there. Even still today, you play a gayish character down in the South, and you're going to draw some heat. The fact that he dressed up in leather outfits, and he had the woman ballet Miss Linda with him. Yeah, I think his first initial match was back. I'm reading this right now. I wrote all this stuff down. Yeah, his first initial match was back in 1957, and he went by the name of Kid Tarzan Jonathan.
Wow.
And he saw a little bit of notoriety of that, but then he acted like a little bit flamboyant in one of his matches, and saw how that got over with the crowd, and that's where he developed the Exotic Adrian Street character, and then that took on, and that had pretty much been who he is up until the end of his career. He's been multiple champions in the NWA down south, and like in the Florida Wrestling Federations down there. I think that's where he retired. When I first got into business, he had a wrestling school called Skull Crushers, and also you could go online. He had a Skull Crushers merchandise shop. You can go in. A lot of wrestlers did this back, and they go in there and buy their wrestling gears from Adrian Street, because he custom made wrestling gear. So he's been in the business a long time. If you don't know anything about him, I would just suggest going to YouTube, look him up, Exotic Adrian Street. You will come across some of his music videos. One of my favorites is his signature song that he came to the ring with a lot of times, which was "I'm So in Love with Me." It's like it's like an old. If you haven't seen it, it's like an old bebop doodop song or whatever. It's like I'm in love. I'm so in love to do to do. I'm in love. I'm so in love to do to do. It's really good.
It's interesting when you think, because I think that sort of effeminate gimmick for a heel, it certainly goes back to Gorgeous George, and then Adrian Street did it, and I guess more people who are our age or maybe a little bit older who had wrestling careers in the 80s and the 90s probably were more familiar with that type of a gimmick from Exotic Adrian than they would have been from Gorgeous George, just because he was around and visible and doing stuff. And when you look at like guys who maybe were in the generation that came after him, like well, Lodi and Lenny Lane did a gimmick in WCW in the last couple years of that company called the West Hollywood Blondes, I think, where they were doing like kind of a gay gimmick.
Adrian Adonis.
Adrian Adonis, really, yeah, big time.
The Flower Shop, to me, it was almost a complete ripoff of what Adrian Street was trying to pull off, because I've seen him do like the Flower Shop gimmick.
Yeah, and well, who's the other guy? Oh, Rico Constantino on SmackDown when he was managing Chuck and Billy. He did a lot of what you might think of like, with the makeup and the sort of prancing around, but yet he was also a ladies' man. So you don't get the wrong idea. He's a ladies' man as well. Gold Dust, a big one.
Gold Dust, I think, is the most successful without actually people thinking that he's gay. He plays a character that comes off as gay, but you don't ever look at Gold Dust as being gay.
Right.
You just look at him as being just more feminine.
Yeah, and I think there was with Gold Dust. I think he even cut a promo early on in the Gold Dust gimmick where he came out and said that he wasn't gay. And I don't know if it was when he was working with Razor Ramon, or he did a thing with Jerry Lawler too, where I think Lawler actually cut a promo and called him a fag, which I mean, even in the Attitude Era, I don't think that was really that cool. But and Goldust cut a promo and said that he wasn't gay. He was just flamboyant, and he just wanted to get into his opponents' heads, and and it's sort of been that way ever since. The thing about guys who work those effeminate, sort of stereotypically gay gimmicks, and it's one of those things as a wrestling fan that, because I love wrestling, I have to sort of try to find a way to think of it as a positive thing, because it's really easy to look at a gimmick like that and go, oh, it's homophobic, he's gay baiting. But if you think about it, and you really want to rationalize it because you're a wrestling fan, what the bad part is on the part of the fans. Like you said, if you play a gay gimmick down south, even today, you're going to get boos, because there's just a lot of homophobia in that part of the country, and they're going to see a gay guy being out and flamboyant and prancing around doing all the stereotypical like effeminate, girly stuff, and they're going to boo the shit out of him because they don't like to see that, because they want to see real men, and real men don't do that. And so in a way, like they're just taking advantage of the prejudice of the crowd, and it's not so much an indictment of the performer as the audience, of being able to say, look, this is my job. I need to get these people to react to me. I'm a heel. They have to boo me. I know how they'll boo me. I know a great way to get them to boo me. I'll just be a flamboyant, stereotypical gay character, and they'll hate me because these rednecks hate gay people.
Yeah, that's the way the business works. I mean, I've had to be heel and I've had to be babyface, one night to another, and I've even been on shows where I've wrestled, like, say, up in the Kaiser area where this guy's a heel, and then on the same night after that show, we'll travel down to Martinsburg, which is a good hour or so away from. But then that guy will wrestle with the guy he wrestled that night, and they'll be baby faces. It's just that you know where you're at and what's going to get over with that. If you're going to be a heel, you got to learn what demographic is in the city that you're going to be playing in, so you can work that crowd. It's definitely a science. So baby faces, baby faces is definitely. It's just praising the crowd and letting them know that you need them 100% behind you. But being a really good heel, you need to do your homework.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is, I mean, if you look at pro wrestling, if you look at the history of wrestling, and you look at the different things that guys have done to get reactions from the crowd, on the heel side or the babyface side, you can find things that guys did that, when you think about it, are really, really offensive, and not just the sort of a gay character, but the thing I always talk about, and I think for some reason I talked about it with my wife the other day. I have no idea why I subjected her to this conversation, but well, I know, because I was watching. They just put No Holds Barred on Hulu Plus, and I was watching No Holds Barred, and we were talking about how back in his heyday, even though Hulk Hogan was supposedly like the pure babyface, that some of the things he would do to get the crowd to cheer him, never mind like Adrian Street acting gay to get the crowd to boo him, to get the crowd to cheer him, Hulk Hogan would do some of the most horrible things. Like if he would threaten to hit women, like if when Macho Man was being managed by Sensational Sherry, and she would get up on the apron to distract him, and Hogan would like grab her by the collar or by the strap of her dress and would ball his fist up, and the fans would go crazy, like, yes, 300-pound man, please punch this woman in the face. And you think about that, and I mean, at the time, I guess maybe I was 9 or 10 years old, and I was like, oh yeah, Hulkster, she deserves it, she's a troublemaker. But now you look back on that, and you're like, holy shit! Did the baby face really get a pop by threatening to punch a tiny woman in the face? Like, so there are things like that, all the way back. That, I mean, you hear like like Dusty Rhodes or Bill Watts or guys who worked in the South, particularly in the South, in the old days, talk about how they would, there would be almost riots at the arena. Like if the heel got one over on the babyface, like the people would just throw chairs. They would threaten people in the street. Like, it was crazy. So yeah, that's something else you have to consider. That's something it's very complex when you try to be like a liberal progressive person, and then you watch pro wrestling and you see all this stuff happening where it's like, oh, he's trying to get over as a heel by acting like a gay person. But that's just part of the deal. I mean, wrestling is there are a lot of difficulties in wrestling. Good guys and bad guys historically have done things that maybe weren't quite appropriate, and there's just nothing you can do about it. And actually, I would say one of the nice things about the way the WWE runs today is there's not nearly as much of that as there used to be. I mean, even back in the Attitude Era, you would occasionally get spots that relied on the crowd wanting to see a man hit a woman. And you don't really see very much of that at all anymore. And to me, I think that's kind of a good thing. I don't know if I would feel quite as good about being a wrestling fan if I was expected to cheer for a guy, who was getting me to chant his catchphrase because he was going to punch a woman in the face.
Well, look at that video.
With that.
I mean, you watched the Adrian
Oh,
Street
yes.
versus Chris. He what's his name, came down and kissed Miss Linda.
And Adrian he starts
smacked the shit out of her. He grabbed hold of Miss Linda for doing that, was smacking the shit out of her.
Lays some forearms into her on the back. Yeah.
That's the first time I've watched that match in its entirety, and I was kind of like, "What the? You're not used to seeing that in wrestling."
He's going off on her.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. And you think maybe that was a little bit because he's like, well, he's working like a gay gimmick, and he's not, it's okay for him to hit her. You know, like if Chris Adams had super kicked her, that would have been cool.
I'm just
But
beating up my girlfriend.
you know, exactly, exactly. Oh man. And I noticed too when I watched it. Speaking of that match, is you linked to a particular match, an Adrian versus Chris Adams from Mid South in 1984. And there's a couple of things about that match I found interesting. First, yeah, definitely that spot after the match when Adrian is like beating on his female manager. And also in the commentary, I noted because Jim Ross was on commentary, and I'm not sure who the other guy was who on commentary. It sounded a little bit like Lance Russell, but I'm not positive. But Jim Ross made sure to get over the fact that that Adrian was dangerous, that Adrian was a capable wrestler. Because the other guy, his partner on commentary, was saying like, "Oh, he's fruity and he's a sissy," and you know, and Jim Ross, not too heavy-handed, but a few spots in that match, he made sure to put over the fact that, okay, you might think he's a sissy, he might be prancing around, whatever, but he's a dangerous guy in that ring, which I thought was, you know, helped to sort of soften the difficult part, I guess I'll call it, of the gay gimmick, to say like, yeah, you know, you might think that he's, you know, your stereotypical view of him might be that he's a wimp because he prances around like a woman, but get in the ring with him and he's still a dangerous dude, you know.
Yeah, let's what else happened on Raw this week? Yeah, Randy Orton. Let's talk about a little bit about Randy Orton coming out at the beginning of the show. Stephanie McMahon called him out, and of course, gave him the riot act because she thinks that Randy Orton's not acting like a champion, which I think right now, the way it stands, the way the authority, whatever they call it, stands. You got Kane, who supposedly works for them, but you know, but I think the way that Hunter and Stephanie are acting right now are pretty much spot on. It's like it's showing strength. I'm the boss. You're going to do what I'm going to do without at that edge of Vince McMahon's assholishness.
Right.
Which, you know, we've seen that that's played out, but I think that their strength right now, the way they handled the Randy Orton issue at approaching him for attacking John Cena's father last week, I thought that played out really, really well tonight, and I like the way that at least their storyline's going.
Yeah.
But yeah, Randy Orton, boy, yeah, he's got quite the lineup coming his way. You know, he's gotta hit John Cena. You got John Cena, and then you got Brock Lesnar, and now you got Batista. All three of them are waiting. And Batista made it very clear that that's why he came back, because he wants to be an undisputed champion that wasn't there before when he was in WWE. So now's the opportunity to be that one WWE champion, and he wants that. And so he's in the Royal Rumble, and he's going to attempt to do that. He wants that headline spot on WrestleMania.
What do you think about? Because I agree with you. I do like Triple H and Stephanie as they're heels, but yet they're also sort of acknowledging that they're executives in the company, and it makes perfect sense for them to sort of do the, you know, there's a new sheriff in town type of thing, and say, look, Randy, you can't go beating up fans. You know, we're a publicly traded company, blah, blah, blah. I think that's a really interesting role for them to have. And like you say, it's different from how Vince did it, when it seemed like when Vince was doing the evil owner thing, he was basically God, you know, and he would send whoever his top heel was out, and they could do God knows what, and he didn't care. You know, people would go out and try to kill Steve Austin, and Vince thought that was great. But you know, Triple H and Stephanie have to be more like, okay, you can't be doing that. You know, we want you to be the champion. We want you to go out and fight and win, but you can't be like dragging people out of the crowd and beating their asses. Okay, that's not cool. I think that's really a good way to do them. That's a good spot for them to have. But I think, don't you think it would be better if Randy wasn't acting like such a lost puppy? I mean, if Randy was not only going out and like acting really crazy and like threatening fans, but he was also sort of doing the Randy Orton thing from a few years ago, where he was like, you know, he was dangerous in the ring too, because he's sort of doing two things at once. And I don't envy him because I feel like it's a tough spot for him to be in. And I think Randy Orton is a terrific performer, but it's like he has to be a badass heel who people are supposed to be afraid of, but at the same time he runs from every fight. You know, he's always whining about, oh, they're making me defend my title against Cena. Oh, Brock Lesnar's back. He wants a shot at my title. Now Batista's back. He wants a shot at my title. And it's like he's simultaneously like a badass crazy heel who you don't know what he's going to do next, and also like a classic sort of Ric Flair cowardly champion heel. And it's hard for me to get a handle on him like that, you know?
Yeah, in my personal opinion, as a world champion, or any title for that matter, and I think right now they're pushing it almost in the right way with Big Show and Brock Lesnar. But I think that's perfect the way they have it lined up. I think this would be good for Randy. It's like, to me, it's like you don't interject your champion into any physical matches during the free show stuff. You know, give them the championship matches on the pay-per-views. And I think not the animosity, but the excitement there, wanting to see someone finally get a hold of Randy Orton is there. You're building that up. It's like every single week he seems to escape getting his just dues, and then of course you head into the pay-per-view where he can't escape those just dues. I think building the storylines like that adds to a better buy rate when it comes to the pay-per-views. Right now they're doing it really well, and if you have any idea what I'm talking about or want to know what I'm talking about, they're doing it really well with Big Show and Brock Lesnar. Brock is acting like he's not afraid of Big Show, and he's gotten in the ring and he's gone against the Big Show, and Big Show gets a little bit of the best of him every time. So that builds up the Big Show, because no one in their right mind, thinking in the long career of what the Big Show has had, that he would be able to actually beat Brock Lesnar. That's not going to happen. So you got to build up the Big Show again a little bit, so to make it look like he's on the equal platform as Brock Lesnar. So Big Show's been throwing Brock Lesnar around from time to time, but they're building up where Brock wants a piece of him, and it gets broken up really quick. So that storyline for that matchup is building up a lot of heat right now. And as much as I don't think that neither one of them have the wrestling styles that I'm interested in, the storyline is interesting enough for me to want to watch the matchup. So I think that's the way all wrestling matches should be built. That right there is the perfect formula for building up any good storylines between just the fluff.
Yeah, I do. I agree with you. I agree with you on that. I agree with you. I think my problem with the Orton thing is just it feels like he's doing both things at once. I agree completely. I think the technique of keeping the two guys separated before the pay-per-view match and keeping the champion off of TV, or at least in terms of having a match before the big match, I think I agree with you completely. I wish they would do that more. I kind of wish they would bring back, at least occasionally, bring back like a squash match. You know, like if you want to have Randy Orton wrestle a match on TV, or you want to have John Cena wrestle a match on TV, fine, have him come out and beat some local indie guy, you know, do his move set and beat him, and then, you know, so at least the fans get to see him. But if you want to see him have the big match with Randy Orton, you have to buy the pay-per-view. Kind of like how they did with Ryback when they first were bringing Ryback up, you know, like he would squash guys. But what about? I think I'm going to try to wrap up here in a minute. But what about? We got the Royal Rumble coming up. When we do this show next week, we will know who won the Royal Rumble. Who do you have a guess? Do you have like a prediction of who you think, based on the last couple weeks of shows, who you think is going to win the Rumble this year?
Well, CM Punk's number one.
Yes,
given to him. I think it's probably going to be Batista. He's already in the Royal Rumble, and the crowd was pretty excited. I think they're going to run with that ball and have him in the Royal Rumble to push him into WrestleMania.
I would say, I mean, and before they established that Punk was going to be number one, I might have put my money on him, but I feel like they've done that, number one guy wins the Rumble story a few too many times. It seems like they've done that two or three times, where like either the number one or the number two guy will hang in there all the way through and win, and that's a great story. But it feels like if they do that too many times, it'll just stop being special. So I guess Batista's the obvious choice. I don't know if they'll go with something else just because I know it seems like they've done that in the past, where they build up to a really obvious winner and then it turns out to be another guy. But then that was when they had two world titles to play with. Now they only have one world title match, so they can't have like, Alberto Del Rio win the Rumble and then just say, oh, we'll just put him in the world title match and it'll be the first match and nobody will care about it. Like whoever wins the Rumble has to be in one of the big matches of the show. So I guess Batista makes the most sense. I mean, why bring the guy back, and make such a big deal about it if he's not going to be in the top match?
I do want to say this about Batista's return, and all wrestlers will do this. What the hell was up with that really, really tight white like running jacket you had on? Because to me it was like fat guy and little coat. and wrestlers always do that shit. I know what you're trying to do, but if you really want to prove to the audience how big you are, don't wear tight-ass shirts. Just come down without a shirt.
Yeah, or come out without a shirt, or come out in like a T-shirt if you want something to take off. Yeah, I agree. That jacket was crazy, and he's doing the pyro and like the machine gun thing, and he's like wearing this ridiculous white like sport jacket thing. It looks like something from the '80s. Like he beat up a smaller guy and stole his motorcycle jacket or something. It was crazy. And then eventually he took it off eventually. Like when he came out the second time to powerbomb Alberto, he had it unzipped, and he just kind of ripped it off. And I was like, why even wear the fucking thing?
No, honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if Alberto and Batista do something in the Royal Rumble to set up for a match at WrestleMania, and then they'll push Batista because he's got a 2-year contract. Batista's got plenty of time to get back up to that level. So a program with Alberto wouldn't hurt him. Just put it on hold because then you only have one belt. You're gonna have too many faces in the picture.
Yeah. That's the thing that I mean, I'm interested at this point because it's been a long time since at least it feels like it's been a long time since they had a main event picture that was so crowded with like really big time stars. Like Cena's always there, Orton's always there. Now Brock is inserting himself back into that picture again. Batista's there, and then you've also got like guys like Punk and Bryan who are always sort of just below that level, and they could bring up at any time. Like they could book a world title match with CM Punk anytime they wanted, even if he's not always in that picture. So it's really interesting to think because you think, okay, these guys are all huge stars. They're all going to have something important to do at WrestleMania. They're not just going to leave Daniel Bryan off the show. Clearly, he has to have something important to do. But who gets the title match? What does if the title match is, let's say the title match is Batista and Randy Orton, what does Brock Lesnar do? If the title match is Orton and Bryan, and let's say they do Punk and Triple H, then what does Cena do? What does Brock do? Who wrestles Undertaker? Like there's all these, you know that the pieces of the puzzle can only go a few different places. But it's like they all have to go somewhere eventually, and it's one of the most interesting times of the year when you're in that mode where it's like, okay, they haven't booked the show yet, or at least they haven't told us what the show is yet, and you're trying to figure out like, okay, where's everybody going to go?
Well, I guess you said we were going to talk about an hour, so it's 5:06 right now. We did start about 5 minutes late, and that is the top of the hour. If you were thinking about wrapping it up soon, but.
Yeah, I think we should.
But I think as to pose a question for next week to all our fans out there watching, I think
yes,
this is what I want to ask: Hulk Hogan, WrestleMania. What's up with that?
That's a good question. Okay, well, let's make that the question for next week. And you guys watching, if you want to leave comments on the YouTube video for this or on my Facebook page or whatever. We'll talk about that next time because that's a really interesting question because you hear about rumors of Hogan being involved in the show in some capacity. That makes it even more crowded. Like, do you stick John Cena in like a bullshit tag team match with Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 30? I don't know. But yeah, that's a great question. That completely slipped my mind, Doc. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, apparently it's probable that Hulk Hogan will have something to do at WrestleMania this year. So, but yeah, let's wrap it up for now. We've gone about an hour. Really, that's about as much wrestling talk as you can stand, isn't it?
Well, I think the wife's
not really.
I think the wife's cooking up a steak for me, and there's some things that's just more important than wrestling and a good old steak. Oh.
And I just noticed. I noticed a few minutes ago. Actually, I was just waiting for a chance to mention it. But I think we're both wearing Superman shirts. Yeah, totally. See, I've got mine.
That is funny as hell because I put this one. I said, what would be ironic, and it's pretty highly probable, is that Steve's gonna be wearing a Superman shirt tonight. I'm wearing mine today.
I swear to God, I don't plan it that way. But almost every time I do like a webcam thing, I always am somehow wearing one of my Superman shirts. Like when I swear, I promise I don't do it on purpose. But anyway, okay, so let's wrap it up for this week. We'll see you guys back at the same time next week. We'll talk some more wrestling. So thanks for watching, everybody.
Good night.